All right, before I get into issue number 2, back to issue 1 here for a moment. I'm not sure why I didn't show this copy I had, but this one actually contains the map inside of the magazine for the second quest of the Legend of Zelda, and essentially it was an entirely new game. Everything was moved around, items, dungeons, things of that nature, so this was a very helpful reference, to say the least, if you wanted to know where everything was. Honestly, you know, back then you would just kind of play, and maybe by chance you'd stumble across something, or maybe you could decipher one of the many obtuse clues that were given during the game. But yeah, so issue number 1 is not complete unless you have the Zelda map included. So there's that. All right. Now, number 2, from September, October 1988, cover featuring Simon's Quest 2. Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest. And this cover, I guess there was some controversy surrounding it after it was published because of the severed head here being held by the main character, Simon Belmont. And I believe some parents voiced their concerns or complaints, you know, maybe a little too graphic for 8, 9, 10-year-old kids back then, but you know, whatever. And so we get into the table of contents here. Bionic Commando is the one of the big games you're talking about. I never played Bionic Commando. I did play this. I finished this. You want to talk about obtuse clues? This game was notorious for like WTF, like stuff you had to do to like to make progress. But anyway, so we're gonna start off with this Bionic Commando. Just gonna give you a look here. Nintendo Power early on only came out once every 2 months, so 6 times a year. And I just remember when I finally did get around to subscribing, it seemed like forever to get that new issue in the mail. Again, just more Bionic Commando maps and things and some other games here. No, still Bionic Commando. So pretty big spread here on Bionic Commando for NES. Life Force, which was a sequel to, I think, Gradius it was. Never played this one. I did play Gradius on the Game Boy Advance many, many years later. I still own that game. And here's Simon's Quest, the game I did finish. One of a few games that I played all the way through to the end. But yeah, there were some things you had to do to progress in this game that were just ridiculous. And if you didn't, you had to like call for help or use a guide or something to some of the things that were required to get to the next stage or the next whatever. But this is a pretty fun game. It kind of deviated from the first Castlevania. This was more of like, I don't know how to describe it. Not really role-playing, but anyway. So here we have just the breakdown of all the different mansions, and hearing some of these songs certainly takes me back. There's a map here of, so every Nintendo Power had a poster or a map of some sort. And this one is looks like a Bionic Commando map, and then a I don't know, not really helpful map of the overworld for Simon's Quest, but and then this was like some Super Mario Brothers 2 follow up here. Some more tricks and tips and things like that. It's a fighting game, Renegade. Not familiar with this one. RC Pro-Am I loved. I played a lot of this. I mean, it just got harder and harder. I'm not sure if there was an ending. Maybe there was, but I feel like you just kept going and going and going and going until you just got knocked out altogether. But it's a very fun racing game back then. Kind of breaks down some of the tracks here. And here's classified information. I remember seeing this trick kind of blew my mind, because when I played Kid Icarus, I thought you had to avoid the Reaper. And I didn't realize if you avoided the Reaper and left one jar remaining, the last jar had like a big bonus in it. And we thought it was, you just leave it alone because of the Reaper's in there. But it turns out that if you actually could avoid the Reaper, then you would be rewarded with something, you know, extra special. And it kind of shows you the order of operation here, depending on, I guess, what shows up if you break the initial barrel or whatever. So anyway, I digress a little. So again, Counselor's Corner. These are probably some of the most popular questions that were being asked on the long distance number phone line that they had, which, like I said, I used to call all the time. Where do I find the credit card in Kid Icarus? Where are the warp zones in Super Mario Brothers, stuff like that. Golgo 13, I'm not familiar with this game. I didn't play really many of the obscure titles back then. It was more or less just like the more popular ones. This one I played a little bit. I don't think this game had a password feature, so, and a lot of Nintendo games didn't. So basically you had to sit down and play all the way through to the end. Or I guess you could pause the system and walk away and come back to it later, but yeah, it's not like today's games where you just save and pick up where you left off. Back then, you actually had to put the time and effort into finishing the game, and you turn that power off, you start all over the next day. So, shows the bosses. Video shorts here, some upcoming games. Not very good games. Jackal was a very popular game. Me and my friend played this all the time. 2-player co-op mode, over and over again. Konami did a really good job with the NES. A lot of good games they put out for the system, and that being one of them. And here's the notice about the Legend of Zelda, The Adventure of Link, the follow-up to the original game. I guess there was a chip shortage, or so they said. So there weren't as many games released during that holiday season as they would have liked, and it was in very high demand. Track and Field 2, I own that game. Played RoboCop, Teenage Mutant Turtles. That's going to be a feature in an upcoming issue. That was a big game back then, without a doubt. Very hard game too. So moving on to the Nest Journal. Celebrity profiles. Who's this? Sean Jones. Then Mailbox. High scores. Video spotlight. This was, you could just like send in, you can send in the picture yourself and say, oh, I'm a power player because I beat this game, I beat that game. All my friends at school call me Nintendo Man or some shit. And so they would highlight one of those letters every month. And in this case, this kid just goes on about you know, the games he's beaten. And then the top 30, I don't think it changed much from the first issue. It's probably near identical. I'm not sure if it was RBI Baseball in the top 10 last month. I don't remember. But the usual suspects, and a lot of these basically stayed in here for years and years. So, and then the back, next issue, and that's it. So that will wrap up the second issue of Nintendo Power Magazine, and more to come. Talk to you then.